Hello, one and all. Or if the show statistics are anything to go by, hello, one. And welcome to another episode of TDNY. This day, not year. The podcast that looks back at the history of the week ahead. I'm your host, Adam. And join me as over the next 47 minutes, on average, we look back at an interesting historical story or event that occurred on the day, not year, of the week ahead. Pair that story with an appropriate song, and then at the end, finish on a quiz, just to see how much you've retained throughout. This week, episode 20, we'll be looking at May 26th through to June 1st, where we'll learn such things as: was the mystery boy the long-lost prince? How to join the Halfway to Hell Club? What first-time event rocked Gorilla World? Why people climb Qomoloangma? Plus a whole lot more along the way. So let's kick things off with Monday, May 26th. On this day, not year, a mysterious boy walked into Nuremberg with a letter and a wish. September 29th, 1812, a prince is born. Son of French Princess Stephanie Beauharnais and Charles, Grand Duke of Baden, a couple paired together by Napoleon Bonaparte. Baden is now part of Germany, but at the time ruled over the southern section of the Rhine River, the French-controlled Alsace region to its west, Switzerland to the south, and Bavaria to the northeast. If you can remember back to episode 15, we talked a little of Bavaria and the beer purity laws then. Anyway, this young prince wasn't to last. A little over 2 weeks later, in October 1812, he passed away. His father dying 6 years later, leaving behind 3 daughters and Princess Stephanie. Spin on to this day. May 26th, 1828. It was sometime in the afternoon, and the city of Nuremberg was lumbering through the Monday morning. Whit Monday, as it were. An apprentice shoemaker was sitting idly, watching the world go by, when he spied a young man wandering the streets, wearing rough clothing and stumbling around as if drunk. Perhaps to pass the time, the apprentice went out to see if he could aid him. The teen proffered him a letter, addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Regiment of Cavalry of Nuremberg, a Captain von Wessenig. Eventually, meeting said captain, the teen handed over the letter and stated, "I want to be a cavalryman, as my father was," and a few interjections of "horse, horse," for good measure. The letter, claiming to be from the Bavarian border, read, as per my Bible growing up, the Reader's Digest book of strange stories and amazing facts. Honored Captain, I send you a boy who is anxious to serve his king in the army. He was left at my house on October 7th, 1812, and I am only a poor day labourer. I have 10 children of my own, and I have enough to do to bring them up. I have not let him out of the house since 1812. If you do not want to keep him, you may kill him or hang him up the chimney. A second letter, claiming to be from the youth's mother, stated she had given him up shortly after he was born in 1812, as his father had died and she could no longer care for a baby. The details differ, but it was either in one of these letters, or offered by the youth himself, that his name was presented. Caspar Hauser. The captain didn't know what to do with him, so sent him off to the local police, who in turn were of a similar attitude. So instead locked him up, jailed away in the Lugensland Tower within Nuremberg Castle, under the care of jailer Andreas Hiltel. Here, reports claim he acted more like a child than a teenager, showing no reaction to different genders, refusing to eat anything that wasn't simple bread and water, and that he would sleep in a crouching attitude with his head between his knees. The mayor of the city was one among many who took an interest in the teen's plight, and he was eventually placed in the care of Georg Friedrich Dormer, a 28-year-old schoolmaster, poet, and philosopher who wanted to create a new religion of love and peace. Under Dormer and the mayor's care, Hauser slowly began recounting his life prior to arriving in Nuremberg. He had spent his entire remembered life living in one room, windows covered, no light let in, a pile of straw for a bed. Each morning he would wake up to find bread and water beside him. Sometimes the water would taste bitter, and he would sleep again. Upon waking, finding that his clothes had been changed, his hair cut, and other hygiene tended to. For years he was alone, only knowing of his jailer from glimpses. One day, shortly before he left, the man, the jailer, appeared more frequently, taught him the phrase, "I want to be a cavalryman like my father," how to write his name, and eventually took him from the darkness, carried him to Nuremberg, and left him there with 2 letters in his hand. The next several years, from 1829 to 1833, were marred by attacks and accidents against Caspar Hauser. In 1829, a man supposedly attacked Caspar, claiming that he must die before you leave the city of Nuremberg, a voice Caspar recognized as his jailer. The man lunged with a knife, cutting Caspar along the forehead. A blood trail left by the fleeing teen leading up to his bedroom, and then down to the cellar, where he was eventually found by Dormer, before being transferred to the care of Johann Beiberbach. While with Beiberbach in 1830, a gunshot was heard from Caspar's room, and once again he was found with a wound on the forehead. Only this time he claimed he had been the perpetrator, slipping from a chair, reaching out to brace his fall, and somehow grabbing and firing a loaded pistol, the shot just grazing by him. After this, Caspar was transferred to be cared for by a string of other people, including a British lord who spent a lot of money on Caspar for the sole purpose of coming to an answer over a question that many people, even the mayor of Nuremberg, had been asking since his discovery. Was Caspar Hauser royalty? Was he even, perhaps, the son of Princess Stephanie and the Grand Duke of Baden? His date of birth and discovery all lined up, with the theory going that the young prince was swapped out for a dying peasant baby, so a scheming relative could secure the line of succession for their own lineage. A vaccination scar on Caspar's arm was proof to many around Europe that he couldn't have been raised by a simple day labourer, as only the upper class were inoculated. December 1833. Caspar was lured to a secluded courtyard by a man with a red face and a black moustache, claiming to have knowledge of his heritage. Holding out a purse containing the promised information, Caspar stepped forward to collect it, only to be pierced through the pec instead. Making his way back home, Caspar lay dying as he recounted the story. A search found no such person, but did recover the purse. It held a note, reading, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border on the river. I will even tell you the name, MLO. Although other accounts have it stating, Caspar Hauser, born April 10th, 1812, murdered December 14th, 1833. These are the initials of my name, MLB. In either case, Caspar didn't last long after the stabbing, dying just 3 days later. The New York Times writing, Caspar Hauser died in 1833 under circumstances as mysterious as his real identity. Was he the son of royalty? His birthright stolen away by a scheming relative as he was kept hidden away from society? Killed before he could ever learn the truth? Well, a 2002 study found his genetic profile to be almost identical to a descendant of Princess Stephanie. So, that's it. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. The 2 letters he offered the captain back in 1828 both had the same handwriting, despite 2 authors and years in between penning each letter. For someone that had supposedly lived his life locked in a room, he was noted as able to climb all 90 stairs in the tower at Nuremberg Castle with relative ease. His vaccination scar, while rare across Europe, was mandatory around Bavaria and Nuremberg, which worked against his raised in solitude story, as doctors doing the vaccination worked out of vaccination rooms and took records of all those seen. Every time Caspar claimed to have been attacked, no one else witnessed his assailant, or indeed any footprints or physical evidence that they left behind. Even his final assault, doctors concluded, was done at such an angle that indicated the possibility of a self-inflicted wound. The final letter hidden in the purse from the claimed assassin was not only written in Caspar's own hand, but also contained grammatical errors common in Caspar's own writing, and was folded in a triangular fashion that Caspar liked to use. Perhaps most damning of all, the DNA test was run again in 2024 with improved technology and techniques. This time, Caspar didn't match Stephanie, or any of the Baden royal line. While we now know he wasn't a royal, we're still left, all these years later, with the same question. Who was Caspar Hauser? From the 1987 album, Solitude Standing, by Suzanne Vega, my song pairing for this story is Wooden Horse, Caspar Hauser's song. A point-of-view song from Caspar's perspective of his escape from darkness, from confinement into light and freedom. I read one person describe the song as haunting in structure, which seems to fit well for Caspar, a man appearing out of nowhere, leaving more questions and answers, and then dying, leaving behind even more. Tuesday, May 27th. On this day, not year, the San Francisco Bay was finally bridged. San Francisco, the Golden City, home to Alcatraz Island, the Walt Disney Family Museum, and, of course, the star of our Tuesday story, the Golden Gate Bridge. Needing to span a mile, or 1.6 kilometer wide bay, across the San Francisco Peninsula to Marin County. The idea for a bridge connecting the two areas was first suggested in the 1800s. Although ferries were in service to get people from one side to the other, This was still a limited service that could take up to 27 minutes to cover the mile-wide gap. It wouldn't be until the early 1930s, with President Hoover announcing the project on the radio, that serious work began on what would eventually be called one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. As one may expect, construction for the bridge, in the 1930s, was dangerous and often deadly. The road section is 220 feet, or 67 meters above the water, while the height of the towers used to hold the cables reach up to 746 feet, or 227 meters above sea level. A 2022 article on newscientist.com titled "Physicists Calculate Highest Dives Most Humans Can Safely Withstand" states, "To determine unsafe heights for diving, the researchers compared the forces they recorded to those known to cause physical damage to people, with the force of impact described as like pushing your fingers very quickly into a jar of honey. The research found a height of 8 meters for head-first dives, 12 meters for hand-first, and 15 meters for feet-first were starting to push the limits of safety, well below the 67 meters between road and water for those working on the bridge. A rather cynical figure puts 1 death per $1 million spent on large construction projects, and the Golden Gate Bridge came in at $35 million. Fortunately, the numbers didn't quite add up for the GGB, as only 11 died during construction. 1 was crushed, while the other 10 fell off the bridge. These 10 were very unlucky. As with our human cannonball Zazelle, these workers were protected by nets. However, the scaffolding they fell from wanted in on the circus act too, and broke through the net as it tumbled, taking the 10 workers with it. The netting wasn't entirely useless, however, saving at least 19 other workers over the course of construction. The first few of those 19, while recovering in hospital together, joked about escaping their fate of falling to hell, and instead quipped they'd only gone halfway. It was from this that they started up the Halfway to Hell Club, membership given to any other workers who fell and were saved by the nets. While membership didn't offer any perks, a letter was circulated out through members, organised by Al Zampa, one of the first that fell. Finally, in 1937, invitations went out, reading, "The citizens of San Francisco and the Redwood Empire counties of California request the honor of your presence to witness the ceremonies at the opening of the Golden Gate Bridge and the attendant fiesta. San Francisco, May 27th to June 2nd, 1937. Although the bridge unofficially opened the day prior, May 26th, with some 200,000 people paying 25 cents each to walk across it. An event recreated on the 50th anniversary, causing the bridge to sag several feet. It was May 27th that the official opening took place. A procession of cars left from either side, meeting in the middle, while 42 Navy vessels sailed underneath, and some 500 planes flew over the bay. Not present at the opening were the Maritime Association, boycotting the event for the inclusion of Nazi flags strung along the structure as decorations. Just earlier that week, the mayor of San Francisco had to offer an official apology to Germany after a Nazi flag was torn down in protest. Also patrolling along the bridge were 200 police officers to prevent anyone attempting to jump over. At the time of construction, it was the longest suspension bridge. Just for some context, 80,000 miles of wire was used as cabling. The circumference of the Earth is only 24,000 miles, meaning the Golden Gate Bridge, if unfurled, could wrap around the Earth a little over 3 times. Still, it wouldn't hold the record of longest bridge forever. 27 years later, a suspension bridge in New York would best the Golden Gate by 18 metres, while 17 years after that, a bridge between Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in the UK would push it down to 3rd place. Today, in 2025, the Golden Gate Bridge ranks as the 21st longest suspension bridge. First recorded in 1936 by George Hall, the official song used for the opening of the Golden Gate Bridge in 1937 was "There's a Silver Moon on the Golden Gate." So I see no reason why history can't be repeated, and once more this song paired with this story. So, There's a Silver Moon on the Golden Gate by Margaret Whiting and Jimmy Wakely is my pairing. Wednesday, May 28th. On this day, not a year, the world, if you believe internet meme culture, changed course to a dark timeline. May 27th, 1999. In Brownsville, Texas, Kayla gives birth to a healthy boy. A few years later, in 2002, she dies. A space heater melting through a plastic box containing chlorine, which then managed to leak into their room, killing Kayla and the boy's youngest sister and his younger brother. 11 others were injured in the gas leak, including 2 who rushed in to provide aid. But all managed to make a full recovery. The event was ruled an accident. In 2014, 12 years later, at age 15, the boy, now a teenager, moves to Cincinnati, Ohio, sent off with the message, "New adventures are waiting for you, big boy." He went along with 2 of his half-siblings and started living under the care of 2 older ladies. Those who had been looking after the teen had hoped that these 2 ladies would be able to help him settle after the move, provide some more structure for him, and some guidance as he continued to grow up. 2 years later, in 2016, the teenager would die, just 1 day after his 17th birthday. May 28th, 2016, had been an ordinary day so far. The teenager had been lazing around, going about his own business, within his own home, when the unexpected happened. An intruder broke in. The teenager confronted the intruder, overpowering him, but ultimately this was to be his undoing. Unbeknownst to both, a sniper had been watching the event unfold. Finally, he had permission to fire, and did so. The shot rung out only 10 minutes after the intruder had infiltrated the house, and Harambe, the 200-kilogram Western lowland gorilla, dropped dead, with a shot that would echo around the world. Western lowland gorillas are listed as critically endangered in the wild, with a population estimated ranging somewhere between 150,000 to 316,000. Ironically, about the same population of Cincinnati itself. The story that one had been killed, in captivity, by the zoo looking after it, angered many as it spread around the world. When the reason why Harambe had to be shot was revealed, their anger found a target, a 3-year-old boy. Michelle Gregg and her children were on an outing at the Cincinnati Zoo. Her son, 3-year-old Isaiah Gregg, was enamored by the Gorilla World exhibit and wouldn't stop at just watching it. As per the Cincinnati Zoo.org website, built in 1978, Gorilla World was one of the first large naturalistic primate habitats in the world. Upon entering the outdoor habitat space, the visitor is immersed in a simulated African jungle. Going on to state that several open viewing areas are available for the zoo guest to look down on the gorillas. The viewing area is guarded by a 3-foot-tall wall, 4-foot-wide bushes, and then a 15-foot or 4.5-meter drop down to a small pool of water. A ladder on the other side, allowing the gorillas to climb up and down to the water and back to their enclosure. At 4 p.m., the Saturday of May 28th, 2016, an event occurred that hadn't happened once in the exhibit's 38-year existence. Someone climbed over and entered Gorilla World. The 3-year-old, Isaiah, had been heard by others just prior, stating that he wanted to go in with the gorillas. As Michelle turned her back, he was up over the railing, through the bushes, and tumbling down into the water before anyone, mother or bystander, could stop him. The 3 gorillas in the enclosure, Harambe, and the 2 females, Chewy and Mara, were called back by keepers. While Chewy and Mara complied, Harambe was curious, drawn to the splashing sounds he could hear down below in the water-filled moat. Finding the soaked boy, Harambe can be seen picking him up, dragging him, examining his clothes and holding on to the child. Meanwhile, the crowd above is screaming out. Michelle, on the phone to police, is calling out for Isaiah to be calm, stating, "He's dragging my son. I can't watch this. I can't. This behavior from Harambe has divided experts. Some, like Gazella Kaplan, an animal behavior expert from the University of New England, stating, "In the wild, I'm certain the boy wouldn't have been killed," while others believe that the noise of the screaming humans above and the unfamiliar situation was pushing Harambe towards aggression and harming the boy. Ultimately, we'll never know which route Harambe would have taken, as zoo officials ended his life shortly after. As per a New York Times article from days later, the shooting Saturday by zoo workers of the teenage gorilla Harambe prompted a chorus of online criticisms, vigils for the animal, complaints by animal rights activists, and petitions blaming the boy's mother. A petition, less than a week after the event, had over 300,000 signatures calling for Michelle to be held accountable for the death of Harambe. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Zoo, also finding itself in the crosshairs of online discourse, took a stand, stating, "We are not amused by the memes, petitions, and signs about Harambe. Our zoo family is still healing, and the constant mention of Harambe makes moving forward more difficult for us." Online searches for Harambe still spike towards the end of May each year, showing many are still thinking of the gorilla even after all this time. Harambe was named by a competition. The winner, Dan Van Coppenolly, choosing the name from a 1982 reggae song, sung by the widow of Bob Marley. The name being a Swahili word meaning working together or the coming together of community. So I think it's only a fitting pairing that for this story we go with the same song. Harambe, Working Together for Freedom by Rita Marley. Thursday, May 29th. On this day, not year, a duo reached new heights. Here's a question. What kills 4.4 people per year? Costs on average $51,000 and can reach as low as minus 60 degrees Celsius or minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. If you answered a trip up Mount Everest, Go straight to the top of the class. Then maybe avoid the top of the mountain. I don't want you to join that 4.4. Standing 8,849 meters, the mountain is the highest in the world. Found on the Himalayan mountain range located between Nepal and Tibet, Mount Everest had many names prior to its current. Sagarmatha in Nepali, meaning goddess of the sky, and the Tibetan name Qomoloangma, meaning holy mother or goddess of the valley. While the British were surveying India, they had several names for it. First, Gamma, then Peak B, and for a while identifying it as Himalayan Peak 15. While this may seem fairly typical, British busting on into another country, rummaging around, taking some things here, renaming other stuff there. That wasn't entirely the case with Mount Everest. During their survey, they had tried to use local names wherever possible. However, due to the exclusionist nature of Tibet and Nepal, they couldn't get a local name for the mountain. Instead, Andrew Waugh, the Surveyor General of India, named it after his predecessor, Sir George Everest. As a quick aside, much like with helicopter actually being pronounced helicopter, we've also been saying Everest wrong all this time too. George, whom the Mount mugged the moniker off, pronounced his name Eve-rest, not Everest. But I digress. Since its quote-unquote discovery by the British in 1849, a few attempts to climb it were made, but for over a century, none was successful. Finally, in 1953, an expedition drawing from across the British Empire was assembled for the climb. Led by Colonel Henry Cecil John Hunt, and containing 13 other members, including a pair from New Zealand, George Lowe and Edmund Hillary. They were also joined by experienced Sherpa. As per Wikipedia, one of the Tibetan ethnic groups native to the most mountainous regions of Nepal, India, and the Tibetan Autonomous Region of China. Perhaps the most well-known of which was Tenzing Norgay, who had made 5 previous attempts at reaching the summit. The group had been divided up into climbing pairs by Colonel Hunt, and each pair would have to contend with the freezing conditions, low oxygen, precarious footing, and even the often reported but never confirmed Yeti. The 2 strongest climbers of the expedition, Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary, had been paired together, and on May 29th, after a sleepless and freezing night, 27,900 feet, or 8,500 meters up the mountain, the pair set off in the morning. Until, in Edmund Hillary's own words, peering from side to side and thrusting with my ice axe, I tried to discover a possible cornice, but everything seemed solid and firm. I waved Tenzing up after me, and a few more whacks of the ice axe, a few very weary steps, and we were on the summit of Everest. It was 11:30 a.m. My first sensation was one of relief. Tenzing joined Edmund at the summit, and the pair shared boyish grins. Edmund proffering his hand for a good Anglo-Saxon handshake before Tenzing embraced the New Zealander in a hug. Next, Edmund took a photo of Tenzing, brandishing his ice axe high, their country's flags flapping in the breeze. Edmund declining the offer of a photo in return, later stating, "As far as I knew, he had never taken a photograph before, and the summit of Everest was hardly the place to show him how." Edmund's first words to George Lowe, his fellow countryman, after climbing back down were, "Well, George, we knocked the bastard off," referring to the previously unclimbed mountain, not Tenzing. The news was rushed out and relayed around the world, breaking June 2nd, the same day as Queen Elizabeth II's coronation day, a coincidence that many saw as a good sign for her reign. While Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay were the first to reach the summit, they weren't the last to try, and while many have conquered the mountain since, many more still succumb to it. 8 died in 1996, descending during a blizzard. 19 in 2015, as an earthquake triggered an avalanche. 1 has died attempting to snowboard down Mount Everest. Others have simply slipped, tumbling down the icy surface, breaking bones as they fall. The mountain is littered with corpses, mummified by the extreme cold. Often these corpses are used as markers to show the living that they are on the right track, a morbid GPS. So, with the costs, the risk of death, the toll that takes on a person, you may be thinking, why even bother climbing the mountain? And, fortunately, we have an answer to that. Perhaps one of the most famous quotes about Mount Everest, one echoed decades later when John F. Kennedy announced plans to put humans on the moon. A quote originally from mountaineer George Mallory. When he was asked the same question in 1924, he only had one response: because it's there. My song pairing for this story comes from a band we've used before, Public Service Broadcasting. A band that make use of traditionally recorded media, interviews, newscasts, etc., and set it to music, cutting the words and voices out and forming a new story. Their song, Everest, takes samples from the 1953 documentary, The Conquest of Everest, directed by expedition member George Low, detailing prior attempts at the summit and the current one, in which the Hillary-Norgay duo conquered it. The premiere of the documentary was even attended by the Queen herself. Friday, May 30th. On this day, not year, the Wanggongchang Armory of Beijing shook things up. We've covered some big booms before. Giovanni Falcone's assassination from 500-odd kilograms of explosives in episode 19. The Sultana steamship explosion from episode 15. All the way back to episode 1 with a nuclear bomb falling from an exploding plane over a Spanish seaside village. Control F'ing through my scripts, the word exploded, explosion, or explosive show up fairly often. Our story from today, however, is perhaps one of the biggest explosions we've featured yet, and with one of the largest death tolls to it. Today finds us back in China, so I'll apologize up top for any and all pronunciations now. Rather than the highly rated Yellow River Stone Forest of Jingtai County, we're a solid ultra-marathon of 1,380 kilometers to the east, in Beijing. We're also in the late imperial era of China, during the reign of the 16th emperor of the Ming dynasty, the Tangqi Emperor. If that doesn't narrow it down, that's 1626 to you and me. 399 years ago on this day, Zhu Yuzhao, aka the Tangqi Emperor, was 6 years into his reign, and just 20 years old. His father, the previous emperor, only had the gig for a month before passing away from diarrhea. Although he was also munching away on pills made from lead, so who can really say what got the guy? Perhaps because he came into the role so young, or maybe due to a hypothesized learning disability, Zhu Yuzhao wasn't a hands-on leader, leaving most of the ruling to those beneath him, who struggled to seize more power for themselves and caused their own conflicts. Meanwhile, he focused on his real passion, carpentry. Despite this fractured style of leading, the forbidden city of the emperor, his eunuchs and concubines, and the imperial city and inner city, what is modern-day Beijing, carried on, and in some cases thrived. One example of the area thriving was in arms manufacture, specifically gunpowder. Known as one of China's 4 great inventions, along with the compass, paper-making, and printing, gunpowder was first created in the Tang dynasty of the 9th century, although reports of something similar can be found as far back as 142 AD. Over the centuries, alchemists and researchers in China had continued changing the gunpowder formula, improving it. Early formulas having it more a weapon of shock and awe, but by the 1200s, it was concentrated enough to propel weapons of war, which soon evolved into cannons and early gun prototypes in the 1300s. By the time of the Tang Emperor, gunpowder was big business, and there were 6 gunpowder factories surrounding the Forbidden City, with one of the largest, Wanggongchang, also acting as a storage area for gunpowder and other munitions. It was also located just a short walk of 3 kilometers, or 1.9 miles, southwest of the Forbidden City, in an area surrounded by government buildings. I'm sure you have an inkling at the direction this story is taking. It was supposedly a cloudless morning on the 30th of May, 1626, when suddenly, just after 9 a.m., an explosion rocked the city. Trees were uprooted and flung about. A stone lion weighing 2.5 tons was lifted and flung outside the city walls. Buildings toppled, tiles tingled off rooftops, and those unfortunate enough to be working on roofs at this time, like the poor 2,000 sods renovating the Emperor's palace, was shaken off. Debris from buildings, clothes, and bodies, whole or piecemeal, were found for kilometers around the site of the blast. People apparently had their clothes and more ripped clean from their bodies from the force. The explosion was heard as far as 90 kilometers away, with those 150 kilometers away reportedly feeling the earth shake from the explosion. As quickly as it had come, the chaos subsided, leaving behind a 2 square kilometer, or 1.2 mile, wide crater up to 6 meters deep in the ground where Wanggongchang had stood, and a large black mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the sky. The houses, buildings, and people in that 2 kilometer area were obliterated. Gone. Just dust in the wind, dude. All up, it is estimated that as many as 20,000 people died in the explosion, or as a consequence of it. This included the Emperor's only son, and seemingly his only competent bodyguard, killed by a falling tile while attempting to get the Emperor to safety. With all said and done, and with the location of the blast known, you would probably assume this would be a cut-and-dry case. Too much gunpowder stored, gunpowder ignited, big bada boom. However, it's not as easy as that. Over the years, this has been classified as a mystery, many believing the stored gunpowder shouldn't have had as much energy to cause this much chaos. Some even calculating the destruction as equivalent to a 20,000-ton bomb, although this is by far an unconfirmed estimate at best. Over the years, others have offered up their own theories behind the explosion, with some of the common ones being a meteor airburst, like the one from our Episode 5 story of the Chelyabinsk meteor, an undiscovered natural gas reservoir beneath the gunpowder factory, a sudden tornado forming over the factory, sucking the gunpowder up and then exploding, and even a short-lived volcano. Some more fringe theories even state that it was a nuclear blast. While all these are fantastical ideas, and would certainly account for some of the damage and descriptions after, it's much more likely that it was just an accidental ignition of the stored gunpowder. Over the years, as the story has been told, retold, translated, rewritten, some exaggerations or errors may have snuck in. Maybe a bit of a cop-out with this song pairing, but I'm going with Gunpowder Tea by Tsuneo Imahori for titular reasons, rather than thematic content. If the explosion had been more numerous, we could have gone with 1812 Overture, but alas, it lives on as a pairing for another day. Saturday, May 31st. On this day, not year, a royal wedding has a killer reception. I think this may be our first stop in Spain, but do write in if I'm wrong. We're here today to witness the marriage of King Alfonso XIII, or, to go by his full name, Alfonso Leon Fernando Maria Jaime Isidoro Pascual Antonio de Borbon y Habsburgo Lorena, to the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, Victoria Eugenie Julia Anna of Battenberg. For simplicity's sake, they'll just be Alfonso and Anna going forward. Although Alfonso only claimed the throne in 1902, he was technically born into it. His father, Alfonso XII, passing away from a 1-2 combo of tuberculosis and dysentery before his son's birth, May 17, 1886. On his birth, and I don't know why, but the newborn king was plopped down on a silver platter and whisked off to be presented to the then Prime Minister, Matteo Sagasta. I can only hope a cloche was lifted first, and a waiter proffered a nice Tempranillo as a pairing. As the young Alfonso was growing up, being taught his kingly duties in a military style, his mother, Maria Christina of Austria, was acting regent. This wasn't a great time for those reigning Spain, mainly for the loss of planes. Spain and America were at war, and one by one the colonies that Spain held, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Cuba, fell to the Americans. Alfonso, once he had grown into his crown, proved to be an interesting ruler. During World War I, Spain was neutral, as their king had ties to both sides. He was also a humanitarian, offering aid and safe harbour to the persecuted Jewish populations. He used his authority to try and have prisoners of war more humanely treated, receiving more than 200,000 letters from families requesting his help during the war. "Your Majesty," begins one from an 8-year-old girl, "Mother is crying all the time because her brother had been taken prisoner." Alfonso responding, "Dear miss, I will do my best to stop your mother from crying, so be so good as to send me exact news of your uncle so that I can take the matter further." And he was as good as his word, getting the prisoner out of a German camp and into Switzerland. He even attempted to negotiate the rescue of Tsar Nicholas II and his family from the Bolsheviks. Refer back to episode 4 to hear how that didn't quite work out. Perhaps the most remembered aspect of Alfonso's life today is also the one that gave him his nickname, the Playboy King. You see, King Alfonso XIII was also partially in the pornography industry. Through the company Royal Films, he commissioned over 70 adult movies. Silent and black and white, he would display these works to private gatherings at his palace, often ending the occasion with a fireworks show. Very suggestive. But back to the story at hand. When he was 19, he travelled to the United Kingdom and stayed in Buckingham Palace, which is where he met Anna. Where, after a quick religious change from Protestant to Catholic to please Alfonso's mother, the marriage was approved and set for May 31st, 1906, as per a cable from London reprinted in the Western Mail newspaper. May 24th. Today the King and Queen Alexandra, the Prince and Princess of Wales, many other royal personages, and large crowds formally bade the princess farewell. Her mother, Princess Henry of Battenberg, and her brothers, Prince Alexander, Prince Leopold, and Prince Maurice of Battenberg, are accompanying her. Little did they know, they weren't to be the only ones journeying to Spain for the wedding. The day of the wedding arrived, and reading again from the Western Mail, the wedding and its attendant procession constituted a marvellous state pageant, brilliant sunshine lending an added glory to the event, which was regarded as a great national holiday. After the ceremony, the king and his bride were greeted by vast and tumultuously enthusiastic crowds of loyal subjects. The royal couple were making their way through the city of Madrid in a carriage, pulled along by a team of white horses. They passed through Calais Major, a narrow street, and from windows high above, bouquets of flowers began raining down on the couple. Flowers weren't the only things falling, however, as hidden in one bouquet was a bomb. It bounced off the roof of the carriage, rolled down the front, stopped between the first pair of horses, and detonated. The two horses were killed in the blast, as was the carriage driver. The royals escaped any harm, a fragment of the bomb piercing into the cabin, snapping a link of golden chain Alfonso was wearing. It was reported that a lieutenant was killed while standing at the salute. Also, 4 soldiers who were among the troops lining the route of the procession. It also decapitated a police bugler, besides killing 2 female spectators and injuring numbers of others. In total, 24 people were killed in the blast, with many more wounded. The man who threw the bomb had wanted to start a revolution. He had failed in his attempt, so instead he swapped his hat and quietly slipped out of the hotel. The hat he had left behind bore the name of a London-based company, and it was quickly deduced that the would-be assassin had been a man named Manuel Duran or Matteo Morale, a Catalonian who had been living in London, but travelled to Madrid to attend the wedding. He was cornered by police 2 days later at a railroad station. Taking out a revolver, he fired 2 shots, wounding 1 officer and killing a bystander, before turning the gun on himself. From a movie about a young prince inheriting the throne to his father's kingdom before enduring an assassination attempt. While it's not a one-for-one recreation, I still think the song Be Prepared from the movie Lion King is quite a fitting pairing for this story. Sunday, June 1st. On this day, not year, Big Cheese makes a big change. A quick one to end on. If you can remember back to last week's episode, you should recall the Judgment of Paris. One of the guests at the wine tasting was Pierre Bregeau, Inspector General Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée Board, or Controlled Designation of Origin Board, AOC for short. The role of the AOC is to ensure certain agricultural products, wines, cheeses, etc., are produced in the regions they are specific to, and with the approved techniques for production. A good example, again from last week, would be champagne produced in the Champagne region. Other countries have similar organizations, The European Union have the Protected Designation of Origin, PDO. The United Nations have the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, while American Wines has the American Viticultural Areas, AVA. What does any of this have to do with our story today? Well, on June 1st, 1951, members from across Europe, Austria, Denmark, France, Italy, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, gathered together on the shores of Stresa, Italy. There, they participated in something that has since been called the Stresa Convention, but also has a much more descriptive name: International Convention on the Use of Designations of Origin and Names for Cheeses. As per the history section on the Gorgonzola website, as a result of the meeting held in Stresa between all major European dairy experts, a convention was signed on June 1st, 1951, to protect Europe's major and typical dairy products. This is also noted on the Parmigiano Reggiano website, stating, in 1951, on June 1st in Stresa on Lake Maggiore, dairy technicians and operators signed a convention in which they set precise rules for recognizing the names of cheeses produced in the various countries agreed upon, with indications of their basic characteristics. The consortium plays a key role in that assembly in bringing the concept of geographical indication to life. The United Nations WIPO has a document of this convention online. Unfortunately, it's all in French, and I can't read any of it. Fortunately, I can read you the names of some of the cheeses included in this convention. As well as the two mentioned above, it also contains Roquefort, Pecorino Romano, Camembert, Brie, Provolone, Emmental, Gruyere, among a few others, including several cheeses from Denmark that I've never heard of before, but am keen to track down the next time I'm at a decent cheesemonger. While all of these cheeses are protected and can only legally be produced by their respective countries and regions, I'd like to end this story on something that's quite the opposite. A cheese that's been declared illegal to produce in its original region. Casu Marzu is an Italian cheese produced on the island of Sardinia that dates back to the time of the Roman Empire, mentioned by both Pliny the Elder and Aristotle. The cheese is a kind of aged pecorino, just aged in a rather special way. The larvae of the cheesefly are introduced to the wheel of cheese. As the worm-like larvae eat through the cheese, they leave behind a soft fermented cheese that is a delicacy. Supposedly, the way to eat this is to place a slice in a sealed paper bag, and the, well, call them what they are, maggots, will jump out against the paper, making a sound almost like popcorn popping as they struggle for oxygen. As the sounds died down, so have the maggots, and the cheese is now probably mostly insect-free and ready to eat. I think I'll just stick with some cheddar instead. Last appearing in our Ripple Rock story, the Evaporators are back, paired with this story, for their very relatable song, Addicted to Cheese. Which brings us to the end of the week, but not the end of the episode. As first, we have the quiz. Let's see if you've been paying attention. Question 1 for Monday. When he first appeared in Nuremberg, what profession did Caspar Hauser wish to follow? Question 2 for Tuesday. How many workers joined the Halfway to Hell Club during the Golden Gate Bridge's construction? Question 3 for Wednesday. How did Harambe get his name? Question 4 for Thursday. Why climb Mount Everest? Question 5 for Friday. Besides gunpowder, what was one of China's other 4 great inventions? Question 6 for Saturday. What was Alfonso's nickname mentioned in the story? And question 7 for Sunday. True or false? England took part in the Streiser Convention of 1951. And the answers. Answer 1 for Monday. Caspar Hauser wanted to be a cavalryman, like his father. Answer 2 for Tuesday. The Halfway to Hell Club had 19 members. Thank you, Si. Answer 3 for Wednesday. Harambe was named by a competition, the winner choosing Harambe from a song of the same name by artist Rita Marley. Answer 4 for Thursday. Why climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. Answer 5 for Friday. I'll accept either the compass, paper-making, or printing as one of China's other great inventions. Answer 6 for Saturday. Alfonso was also known as the Playboy King. And answer 7 for Sunday. That's false. Despite having some regional cheeses, England wasn't invited to the party. Which brings us to the end of the episode for another week. A fairly long episode too, breaking that 47-minute mark average. So hopefully you've learned a few new things along the way, and will be well armed with a wealth of facts for your next pub trivia night. As ever, if you have enjoyed the episode, and are feeling particularly extroverted today, I'd appreciate it if you could share it with friends, family, or random strangers on the internet, as any new listeners really help the podcast grow. Failing that, I'd be more than happy with a rate and a comment. If I've made any glaring mistakes this week, pronunciations aside, or if you just want to reach out to me, I can be contacted on thisdaynotyear@gmail.com. Join me again next week, where we'll be looking at June 2nd to June 8th, and all the interesting history that week contains. Until then, I hope you all stay well and have an historic week. Bye.